Hey everyone, Sparrow here. If you are new to this channel, welcome to True North Sanctuary, and if you are returning, hello! Happy to have you here again. Today we are doing a little bit of this, a little bit of that, but starting with planning. I like to have a general layout of my zoo before I start building habitats, so these boxes I'm creating will be the placeholders for buildings and habitats. The Arctic wood means habitat and concrete means building. We'll be doing a little bit of terraforming as well and laying down some preliminary paths just to make sure the layout works. So you may be wondering, how do you know these habitats are big enough for the animals you want to put in them? I learned this trick from ZSH Plays, where first you use the Zoopedia to figure out the total area you will need for the number of animals. So for a black-tailed prairie dog habitat, let's say I want 15 of them in there. Prairie dogs need a land area of 180 meters squared, plus 12 meters squared per each additional prairie dog. So 12 times 14 plus the original 180 meters squared equals 348 meters squared. Let's round that up to 360 so we can add some rocks and other things that will affect hitboxes, then find the square root of that number. So in this case, that would be about 19. But we need a number that's divisible by 4, because the wall pieces we have in game are 4 meters by 4 meters. So that means we're going to round up to 20. We need 5 4-meter pieces per side of our square. If I'm making a long habitat, I might subtract a panel from one wall and add it to the other to make a rectangle. That fudges the numbers slightly, but ultimately I'm generally building the habitat larger than the placeholder, so it usually works. If math is not your forte, I actually have a gift for you. The way this works is we have all of the animals available to us in PlanetZoo down the side here, including those from the latest DLC, and then their land, water, and climbing area requirements. Initial is how much you need for one animal, and then additional is for each animal after that. So if I'm building a habitat for the American bison, we're going to put 4 of them in there. Over here, it gives us the total land, water, and climbing needed for those 4 animals. Now, if we go over to this handy little box here, it gives you the same 3 values, but it also gives you the total surface area required, which is the land and water combined, as well as the square root of that number, so that we know how long each side of our planning box needs to be in meters. We also have the total number of animals in this habitat and how many species you have. So if you want a multi-species habitat, let's say American bison with the pronghorn antelope, we're going to put 6 of those guys in there. This only gives you the requirements for that one species. But if we scroll back up to our box, we now have the total combined land, water, and climbing requirements, as well as the updated surface area, updated square root, and now we see that there are 2 species in this habitat and 10 animals. When you're done, or if you want to calculate another habitat, you can click this handy reset button, which clears this green column here. If you're interested in this habitat size calculator, you'll find it in the description below. The link will prompt you to copy the Google Sheet to your own drive, including the script that allows the reset button to clear the data. If you have any issues or find any mistakes, make sure to drop me a comment. Now it's on to our planning. The center path of our zoo is planned, so we're going to focus on the left side of the main path today. Adding some exhibits at the entrance, there are very few exhibit animals that can be found in Canada in this game. One of them will be more so borrowed to stand in for another species that I thought would be nice to have in this zoo. The rock terrain paint you saw me putting down is my marker for where the water will be. I like to have an idea of that, especially with how annoying the water can be in this game. The rock terrain is for water and the soil is for paths, just to differentiate them a little. I think I learned this trick from Pacha here on YouTube. Pretty sure the water ends up being diverted anyway to make room for the walkthrough exhibit, but oh well. As I build up the habitats, you can obviously see me writing down what animals will be in each one. As viewers, do you want to know? Is knowing which animal will be added here exciting for you, or would you prefer to not know? Each upload is basically a mystery animal. Maybe you like a little bit of both, let me know in the comments. And in case you're wondering what I'm doing here, I'm just checking to see how much space this lake will take up, so I hit the water requirements of the animals I want in this habitat. And over there's that walkthrough exhibit I was talking about. You can probably guess what's going to end up in there. I do wish we had some small birds to put in the walkthrough exhibits, especially with my screen name being Sparrow. You know I obviously love birds. Some little finches could be cute, parrots, though obviously not for this biome. I just really thought that with the addition of bats, Frontier was setting us up to add more flying animals, but there's still hope for the future. I actually did some more research about wildlife reserves in Alberta, Canada, which is where our zoo would potentially be located, and was surprised to find that there aren't very many sanctuaries north of Edmonton, or basically in the upper half of Alberta. There are a lot more of them in the south of the midpoint of the province. But the few I did find in northern Alberta were actually bird sanctuaries. There's one ecological reserve with a lot of nesting ospreys and eagles apparently, but also other wildlife like wood bison, so that's pretty cool. Not really places you can go and see animals in habitats like here, but it's good to know that there are so many provincial parks working to help preserve animal diversity. So still not sure where exactly this zoo would be, but we're going to say somewhere in the upper half of Alberta. We're going to jump over to the start of our water feature, which will be a waterfall that runs from this top pond all the way down to the beaver and moose habitat at the bottom of this section of the zoo. The hardest part of waterfalls for me is the terraforming. I think the water only works in 1 meter height increments, so you need to make sure each level is at the correct height, otherwise it just doesn't work. I will usually put the water tool where I want the water so that it highlights with the green or the red, and I'll look for where the line falters and then fix that part of the terrain. That's usually where the water is leaking out and not allowing you to fill it. I also add glass to hold back the water, and then it acts as a placeholder for where I'll put my water effects later. And then also make sure that it's lower to the level of the water so that it's not sticking out and super obvious. Such an effort to make waterfalls. I remember in Zoo Tycoon 2, you just had to make a lake higher up, another lake below, and then drag the water from the top lake over the lip to make a waterfall. The ones in Planet Zoo obviously look more realistic, but sometimes I long for the days of Zoo Tycoon simplicity. Finally, I would be adding the rockwork and planting and all that jazz, but we'll save that for a future episode. Right now it's greenhouse time. First order of business is building some garden beds, which we'll make out of some wooden planks and fill with mulch. I ended up fitting 14 of these guys in the greenhouse. I don't know about you, but I love greenhouses. Just the smell of the earth, the greenery all over, the fact that they give you some fresh food, all of it. The only downside is the amount of work it takes to have a greenhouse and take care of all of those plants. I do think it's worth it, and apparently gardening is very good for your health because it's a surprising amount of physical activity. Using one of our lovely zookeepers to measure the height of our next project, which is a propagation station that will also be inside of the greenhouse. The purpose of these tables would be to grow seedlings that can then be replanted into the garden beds once they're big and strong enough. Might need to add some grow lights to them because in March, when a lot of seeds are started, it still gets dark out relatively early in the day, so the seeds need all the light they can get. And since the growing season in Alberta is so short, seedlings have to be started indoors. I looked up the frost dates and it looks like the last frost date is mid to late May, though there's still potential for snow afterwards, and the first is the beginning to middle of September, so super short. During my research, it looks like there was a surprise snowstorm just a few weeks ago on Father's Day in the Rocky Mountains on the west border of Alberta. Like hikers trapped on trails and everything, which is a little concerning. Unless you're a diehard skier, I don't think anyone... This was my attempt to clutter up the propagation stations with some pots and some what are those called again? The little dishes that go under the pot to help with drainage? Plant saucers. And then at some point before the cinematics, we'll finish it off with some of the moss decals recolored to brown to act as spilled dirt on the floor. To act as our seedlings, we'll be using the smallest temple plants and the smallest lords and ladies plant, the one without the flower. Just some green leaves, could arguably be some small herbs, some young cucumber or pepper plants maybe, just something that gives us those fresh green leaves. We'll use those same plants in our garden beds, though with a little bit more variation so they look like they're a little older, and then copy across to each of our garden beds so we have a nice full greenhouse. And this is why I usually work with the roof off when doing interiors, just constantly clipping through. In this corner, we'll put some sunflowers. They look quite nice and tall up against our greenhouse walls. And in the other corner, we'll have some tomato plants to match the height. Some larger tomato trellises in the back, and then some shorter ones in the front. Maybe a few different varieties of tomatoes, but I'm no tomato expert, so I'm not sure if you can grow different varieties in the same garden bed, or if you have to separate them. I know some plants choke out others, but not sure if that would be the case here. We'll also use the vegetables available to us in the construction panel to liven up the garden beds with some fresh produce and to make it look like there are actually edible things growing in here. Some cauliflower, squash, carrots, potatoes, and pumpkins for our future animals to enjoy. One last thing in our greenhouse, a tool wall with plenty of tools to choose from for use around the staff complex. Lots to choose from so no one's fighting over anything. Hopefully they are all very professional zookeepers and wouldn't anyway. Maybe they have a get-together in the spring to plant seedlings, and then some produce parties in the summer to pick all of the ripe fruits and vegetables together. Could be a fun team bonding activity. The final part of our build for today is the staff parking lot off to the side of our delivery gates. First, we'll build up the bridge that crosses over the guest spawner, which is hidden underneath in that tunnel there, rearranging some plants just to make sure we don't have any random nettles or pines growing out of the concrete. The black path that I'm lining is just the black asphalt path. I used the grid to create the plaza that is our parking lot. And then using the same rock pillars to outline the garden bed. Yes, another garden bed, you know I love my gardens. But the rock pillars will help unite it with the beds that are up near the zoo entrance. And the last thing to do here is recolor the bridge supports to match the gray concrete we've been using throughout. As you can maybe see at the top of the construction panel, I finally got around to making a tag for the plants I'll be using in True North Sanctuary. There is a TNS trees group and a TNS undergrowth group. I like having two categories of plants because it helps me see very quickly the variety of ground cover I have and the types of taller silhouettes I have available. Makes planting easier. For the trees I have surrounding the edge of the entrance path, I created a group of 6 to 7 trees I was happy with that I copied around, and then I made a patch of undergrowth that I then also copied. In this garden bed, I'm just placing things down at random, but if you're trying to cover a larger area on the outskirts of your zoo or even between paths, it's a lot easier to create a group of each that you're happy with and then copy it. Make some changes or add a few more trees, plants if there's a gap, and then you're good to go. Here I'm adding rocks in the gaps because that's also nice and easy. Added some vehicles from the workshop to our empty parking lot. Those will be added to the collection below, and we'll be making the parking lines with the planetzoo gutter pieces, just making sure to measure out the width of the parking stall perfectly on the first piece so I don't have to go back and redo the whole parking lot. The piece at the top will be deleted at the end. I'm just using it as a measuring tool so that each parking space is the same width. I line up the right side of it to the previous parking line, and that helps me get all the way across without any issues. And we'll just repeat that all the way around our parking lot. While I finish up this center portion with some more parking stalls, big thank you for hanging out, checking out my videos, subscribing, leaving some incredibly lovely comments, and all of your likes and support so far. I feel very lucky to be part of this awesome creative community. And the people have spoken. Most of you said tours over cinematics. So here we are at our delivery gates at the entrance to our staff parking lot. We have a wolf statue off to the side using some of our branding colors on the legs to bring it into the scenery. And then we have our gates with some signage to keep out if you are not a staff member. Oh, look at that. I didn't even know this workshop car had smoke coming out of its exhaust. That's really cool. Anyway, we're gonna head over to the staff gate there, and we are in our staff parking lot. So we have a bunch of different vehicles from the workshop in here. Thank goodness I did not need to make these myself because that would have taken way too long. And then over here we have a pickup truck parked across 2 stalls because that's pretty realistic. Some drains in the ground as well, and then just some weathering decals to help bring that realism to it. We're just going to hop the fence over here to quickly look at the groups of plants I was talking about. So this is my undergrowth group. I made one and then just copied it around the forest floor. A group of rocks, same thing. And then my 6 to 8 trees in a group, which also gets copied around. It's just a lot easier than having to place each and every single tree and plant individually. So you just make one group that you're happy with and then copy it around. This walkway over here still needs some finishing details, probably some sort of fence so no one falls into our guest pathway down below. A little keypad that I made myself. And then we're gonna walk into our backstage area, which is where we toured last time, and just fast forward through our little staff building here. Some finishing details as well, fire extinguishers on the walls, some tool racks just around the corner here, shovels because we'll be needing those in the winter, and brooms just to keep things nice and tidy. And then we're gonna walk over to our greenhouse. So welcome. We have our propagation stations over to the left here. Some plants that are not quite ready for the garden beds. But we do have some dirt on the floor, so that's just the moss decal, recolored to be brown. And in the propagation station, one of the gardening tools, so that it looks like it's actually been used recently. Then some hoses on the wall, because we need to water our plants with something. And we have our garden beds, so we have some pumpkins, some flowers that will probably eventually be put into a habitat, carrots, tomatoes, potatoes, some general greenery, probably some herbs maybe, some squash, cauliflower, sunflowers, and then some more tomatoes in the corner. And same thing, just tools in the garden bed so it looks like they're not all neat along the wall, like there's actually been something going on in here. And we have boxes of collected produce on the ground, some more of those moss decals to make it look like dirt came out of the garden beds, and so on. Yeah, I'm actually pretty happy with how this turned out. Hopefully it can offset some of the costs. Obviously not an in-game mechanic, but you know, in my mind it'll offset feeding costs. And here's the outside of our greenhouse. Really quickly before we go, here is some construction signage I added to our chipboard wall. And this is one massive wall in the main entrance that I have no ideas for, so if you have any ideas for this blank wall, please let me know in the comments below. So I know everyone said tour, but I just had to play around with the new cinematic camera. So I'll leave you with those. See you next time. Bye.